Hello and welcome to Penelope's Chinwag. It's that time again and I've got a few things to show you, a few things to talk about. I'm going to read you the next little bit of my story and thanks for joining me. I have some lovely new people that are watching, and in case you didn't know, if you go back to episode 1, I know it seems a long time ago, my mum was on and she's talked about her history. You know, she was 14 when the war started in London. She lived in London, and so she talks about that and her family. Pete reads some of his stories that he wrote, and I don't know, just talks about his life. And so if you go back, that's what you can find. You can also find, I did 4 videos on how to make a quilt for absolute beginners. I've told you how to make a macaron, and I've told you how I knit my socks. So if you'd like to look under those playlists, there is a playlist for my story as well, which started episode 1, 1949. So that's the introduction. I'm Pene and I lived in the southeast of England, right at the seaside on the White Cliffs with my husband Pete. This episode, oh look, I've just got a pile of things on my lap. Shall I go straight in and just say this is what I've been reading, and I can so recommend it if it's your thing, you know. It's such a lovely, easy read. I read a little bit before I go to sleep, and I must say it helped me settle down and sleep well. It's called Raising Hare. When Chloe, a sitting dweller professional with a high-pressure job, finds a newly born hare, endangered, alone, and no bigger than her palm, she's compelled to give it a chance at survival, despite being the least likely caregiver to this wild animal. And Chloe is actually a politician, and of course lockdown comes, COVID times, and she's at home in the countryside, and she comes across a newborn leveret. Knows nothing about animals, never been even. In fact, in one part she says the guy at work came in and he was very upset. He was tearful because his dog had died. And she thought, well, get over it. Don't embarrass yourself by crying. It's a dog. She had no affinity with animals whatsoever. But she really not only has an affinity with the leveret that she finds, but she learns a lot about it because there isn't a lot written about hares. People don't know a lot about hares, and yeah, she was successful in her raising and found out a great deal. And it's just her way of noticing nature, and that's good for all of us, isn't it? So I can recommend that book if you fancy it. So there we are, that's what I've got on my lap. To just put up a little film, because as I was doing the various parts of quilting this, I showed you how I did it. Now this is a panel, I've showed it before, but I know a few of you have bought the panel, and some of you are thinking, oh, I've never done anything like this, you know, where shall I start? And so I'm going to put up where to start, and then I'll show you this finished. This is a quilt panel, which is always good if you're a beginner, but even if you're not a beginner, if it's the panel you want, then what could be better? I am ironing this. I don't want any creases. A crease won't be good once it's quilted. And so you like to start off pressed. And I've pressed the back too. That's the backing we've decided on. I've also cut my wadding, and now that's in a sandwich, as you can see here. There's the backing, there's the wadding, and there's the top. Make sure that's all smoothed out, there's no wrinkles. So I've decided just to pin my first row together. I don't pin the whole quilt because I find by the time you've quilted this row, you'll need to smooth this out. So just do it a row at a time. So I'm going to pin this top row with my quilting pins. They're bent. Let me show you. You don't have to if you haven't got quilting pins. Just use ordinary. But a quilting pin is slightly bent so that it goes through. I'm going to pin the top and then we'll talk about what I'm going to use to quilt it with. So there we are. I've just done 2 pictures. Then, as you can see, as I quilt it, those 2 will stay firm and then I can smooth it along. I'll show you as I go. The important thing is to make sure that the back is flat too. Can you see I've got a little ruck there? So that pin needs to come out. Doesn't matter because it's on the outside. But if you have a little ruck, you see, like that. That's why I don't pin the whole quilt. That's on the outside of the quilting. So that'll be all right. The inside is fine. And I've just chosen to do a small area. Let me get that quilted and then I can move along and smooth the back, smooth the front and do that area. Or I can choose to do the 2 underneath and do downwards. I can go whatever way I like. I have got some variegated thread on my spool. I've got some variegated thread here. This is from Steph Francis. It's very nice. Fine pearly. She sells her things online. And I like that because it's similar colours. But you can choose to do anything. Anything will look lovely on here. So you could go for something fine and not do the thicker. I've got plenty here, haven't I? And of course I love the Aurifil 12. There again, it's a thicker, very vibrant. There's lots to choose from. The wadding I use is the Hobbs Tuscany collection, the ultimate quilt batting, developed for discriminating quilters. It's 100% wool. I do love it, purely because when you pick it up, it isn't a heavy quilt. It's very light, but warm. So here we are. I pinned 2 squares and quilted them. Then I smoothed it out and pinned another 2 squares and quilted them. I then smoothed down on the back as well. You have to be very mindful of the back. I pinned another 2 squares and quilted those. Moved along, pinned that on the back as well. Always smoothing. We don't want any rucks. And I find that as you quilt this, if you'd have pinned this, I would have had to move the pins because quilting changes things. So I did those 4. Then I came down here, and as you can see, I've pinned another 2 blocks. I've quilted them. Really makes it stand out. And now I'm going to undo those pins and smooth this out. Smooth it out and smooth it out on the back. And I'm going to quilt these. And then I shall go 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. So I finished doing all the rows of quilting around. Some of them are so pretty. This one, for instance, this background, this here, I love him. So this is now all quilted, and I've now cut out 2 inches strips of the backing. I'm going to sew that together in a long strip, and then I'm going to iron it in half. I'm also going to cut the edges straight. I decided to draw an inch away. I've done it, well, you could do it with anything because it's going to be cut off, but I've done it with a water-soluble pen. And I've just drawn an inch away from here, taking this as my measuring line. I'm going to cut that and then sew the binding on there. I know people that watch me, they make the most wonderful quilts, but then other people have never made a quilt. And so there is always the option to use bias binding. However, this was a strip I cut 2 inches. Now, on my videos, 111 and 110, around there, I always usually cut this strip 2.5 inches, but I didn't want to today, and that's what happens with me. I tend to change things up. But 2.5 inches is the best because it gives you a lot more to turn over. So now we haven't got any raw edges. I'm turning that over. I'm folding it over, and I fold it like this. Fold it over, I clip it. I've clipped all along here. But here's where I'm sewing. If I'd cut it 2.5 inches, it would have come down to here and given very easy then just to plop it over. But I wanted a tight edge. I don't know why, don't ask me. I just did. I just wanted a small tight edge. And so that's what I've done. Hello. On the right side it's looking good. And on the wrong side it's just very neat, just thin, just enough to cover over. So you've got the choice to cut it 2 inches and fold it, and then you sew it just below that sew line. No raw edges, they're all inside. That's how I made it. It didn't take me too long to quilt it, and I used in the end the King Tut superior thread, and it's number 926. But it's fine. You can use it on the machine or on, and so it went through the fabric very quickly and very easily. So that's what I chose to do it with this time. And here's the quilt finished. I've shown you one before. I really love it. Both my girls wanted one, and when they saw one I made for Tommy, my great-grandson's cousin, and so I've made one. This is for Kim, my daughter. Of course, she's how old? 56. Yeah. You tend to think you're making quilts for your girls and they're 11. But she's 56. But don't we all love the Beatrix Potter? And that's it finished. So that's the front and that's the back. There we are. That's what I've been doing this week. And that's going to be given as a present. I've also got on my lap here a pair of socks. I know, how many pairs of socks does Pete need? But I feel the more socks you have, then you just wear them, you know, and they last then. Whereas if you just wear 1 or 2 pairs, they're going to wear out. And he likes all different colours, and he so appreciates my socks. He loves every single pair. So it's a pleasure to knit them. And here we are. my 3x1 rib. I picked up an extra 2 stitches there so you don't get any holes. And I show you on my How I Knit My Socks video, how I knit my socks. So that is absolutely beautiful, beautiful wool. And that is Woolly Mammoth, naturally dyed luxury and hand spun yarns, the Woolly Mammoth company. It's her natural sock wool, which is 50% Cheviot and 50% Blue Flaced Leicester, and it's source spun and made in the UK. There's the socks, another pair. Bites the dust. So that's what I've been doing this week. So, what else? I know, I wanted to say, you know, we've had a heat wave in Britain, and that, well, here in the southeast it just has not relented, and it made me think of a beetle in the Namib desert. There's no water. I mean, it's just absolutely barren. It's as dry as a bone. And I keep getting on my phone, you know, don't use the water from our water board, or use as least as you can, because we haven't had rain for so long. And this beetle, he's a darling little thing. And what he does is he stands on his head. He goes up to the top of a sand dune, and although there's no water in the Namib desert, there is fog. Fogs come in the morning, I think. And so he stands on his head on the top of a sand dune, and there's little knobbles and bobbles on his back and little furrows, and the knobbles and bobbles attract the water, and then it runs down in these channels, and he drinks it. And fantastic design, I think. And the scientists are trying to copy it because they want to, make tents like that, so that if you're, you know, well, they did say in the bit I read that if it was for, refugee camps, and it could trap the water, and then I think they could, purify it. But of course, this little beetle does it all on his own and stands on his head, so if you ever see one, you'll know what it is. Not that we're walking around the desert, are we? I'm going to read you my story now, and I think that'll be my episode for this week. Now, where were we? Oh, yes, Pete and I just met. If you remember last week, I met Pete, and he asked me how I was getting home. I didn't know. So he said, why don't you come and stay at mine with his mum and dad? And I said, okay, I'll ask my mum. I'd never done anything like that before. So there we were in the phone box. Mum, I've met someone called Peter, and he's asked me back to stay. His mum and dad are in, and I'll be fine. I held my breath while she went to ask Dad. All right, she said at last, as long as you're sure. I think they were just relieved they could go to bed and not worry about me getting home. I let out a quiet sigh of relief, and we went back in to say goodbye to Doreen and her family. When we got to Peter's house, it must have been around 12:15. His mum was in the kitchen with a fish slice in her hand, trying to lever off some jelly dishes that had overflowed and set firm on the worktop. They had those red fluted edges, and they were well and truly stuck. Hello, Mum, Peter said casually. This is Pene. I met her at Doreen's. It's okay if she stays, isn't it? I felt so embarrassed, turning up at that hour asking to stay. It felt so awkward. Fine, she said with a smile. You'll have to make up a bed on the dining room floor. Then she turned to me and added, I wish we had a spare room. Sorry it's a bit of a muddle. We're moving house. But she wasn't bothered at all. In fact, she said she loved visitors, especially unexpected ones. Well, thank goodness for that, I thought. She made us a cup of tea while Peter started sorting out bedding, and I told her a little bit about the party. Then his dad popped in and helped him with the mattress. They were both so friendly and kind, so down to earth. It put me at ease. I was wearing a pale pink, very fine woolen dress made especially for me by the lovely dressmaker I'd found. It was short with puff sleeves that stopped just above my elbow, a scooped neckline and little covered buttons down to the waist. I slipped it off, laid it carefully over a chair and decided to leave my underwear on before getting into bed. I felt far too excited to sleep. Not that sleep was really on my mind. About 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. It was Peter. "Hello, you don't mind if I come in, do you?" "No," I said nervously. "What about your mum and dad? Won't they hear us?" "Don't worry," he whispered. "They're out cold. They've got the party tomorrow and then the move. They're exhausted." Trying to keep things light, I asked, "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" "One brother," he said, "Dennis. He's 13 years older than me, so he's 35. Mental arithmetic wasn't my strong suit, but I managed to work out that Peter must be 22. Dennis is married with 2 children and lives in Ramsgate. "Oh," I said, not quite sure where Ramsgate even was. Actually, it's 5 minutes away from where I live now. "Will you miss your parents when they move to Devon?" I asked. "I will," he said, "but I haven't lived with them for quite a while. When they told me Pop wanted to semi-retire and asked if I minded, well, I didn't want to say no, and I can always visit. I love Devon. When I was 12, Mum and Dad had a small win on the football pools. They bought Dennis a car, got me a bike, and we started holidaying in Devon. It's beautiful. Have you ever been?" "No, not to Devon," I replied, "but I've been to Mevergizzy in Cornwall loads of times." There was a bit of a pause. "So, what do you do for work?" I asked, half hoping he'd say something steady, like an accountant or a solicitor. "I'm in the army," he said, "posted at Millbank in London. I work as a chef in the Queen Alexandra Hospital." And just like that, my heart sank. You see, I was born in 1949, just 4 years after the war ended, and it had shaped everything around me. Growing up, it wasn't unusual to see bomb sites, big chunks of ground still being cleared or rebuilt. Rationing ended when I was 5, and even though the fighting had stopped, the war was still in the air. Adults talked about it all the time. It was recent history to them. Some of my uncles were unwell from their injuries, and when I visited friends, their dads would often need silence, worn down in ways I didn't understand yet. And just as all that began to fade a little, the Cold War took its place. I never quite grasped what it all meant back then, but it was always on the telly. We talked about it at school. Somewhere along the way, I developed a quiet fear of anything military, anything uniformed, anything that sounded like war. And now here was Peter, my prince, telling me he was in the army. We'd only known each other 4 hours, and already it felt like I'd hit my first big stumbling block. Well, there we are. That's the story for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we haven't been anywhere, just a little walk along the seaside as usual. Perhaps next time it'll be something different. So until then, take very good care of yourselves. I hope you're enjoying all the warm weather And if you're in the other part of the hemisphere, I hope winter's not too bad. So I'll see you soon. Take care. Cheerio.